cocoon of lies. The next morning, Sunday, we went to church and then came home and prepared our visit to my grandparents as if we were going to visit royalty. Aunt Sarah explained that everyone had to wear his or her best clothes and be prim and proper. She paraded through the room explaining that I was to wear and how I was to wear my hair and carry myself. Olivia doesn't like women who have their hair loose and down. She says it makes them look like witches. Use bobby pins and combs to wrap your hair neatly. And no makeup, not even lipstick. You can wear the charm bracelet, of course, but rings and necklaces, especially earrings, don't belong on ladies, she says. Is that what you think too, Aunt Sarah? What I think doesn't matter. When we go to Samuel and Olivia's home, she replied. Jacob's pleased when they're pleased. And you, when are you pleased? Aunt Sarah paused and gazed at me as if I had asked her the most ridiculous question. I'm pleased when Jacob's pleased, as any wife should be. I hope that my husband would want me to be happy too and care about my feelings as much or more than he cares about his own. My daddy was like that. Oh dear, don't say things like that in front of Jacob, especially not today, she warned. Maybe I shouldn't go, I said. Alarm sprang into her eyes. You have to go. It's Sunday. We always go to Samuel and Olivia's for Sunday brunch, she said. Why, Laura used to look forward to going. Olivia's always has wonderful things to eat. Laura loved the tiny cakes with frosting and jelly in the center. And Samuel always gave her a crisp $5 bill when we left. She was the apple of his eye. She paused to take a deep breath. For a moment she seemed locked in a daze. Then her eyes snapped closed and open and she spun around. Try to keep your shoulders back and your head up when you walk. Olivia hates the way young people slouch today. She's saying that posture shows character and embellishes good health. No one's ever said I slouch. No, you don't, but just be more attentive to it. Well, I must see about May. I took a deep breath and rose, feeling more nervous this morning than the day that I arrived. When I finally thought myself dressed well enough and looking somewhat the way Sarah had wanted me to, I descended the stairs to find the family waiting in the living room. Everyone was still dressed in their church clothes. Uncle Jacob wore a dark blue suit and tie. Carrie wore a light blue sports jacket, tie, and slacks. His shoes were spit-shined. May looked sweet in her pink cotton dress with her hair tied with a pink ribbon. She wore black patent leather Mary Janes. Aunt Sarah had on a dark blue, high-necked dress with a belt at the waist. As usual, she wore no makeup and only the locket for jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun that was held there with a bone-white comb. They all stared at me when I entered. I was being inspected. I waited for approval. Carrie's eyes widened and then went darker before he looked away. I was sure it was because I was wearing another one of Laura's dresses, this time a pretty cream-colored one. I couldn't wait for my own things to arrive. Well, she looks very nice, doesn't she, Jacob? Aunt Sarah asked meekly. He said reluctantly. Did you take her out and talk about her behavior? Not yet, she said. What have I done now, I asked. It's not what you've done, it's what you might do, Uncle Jacob remarked. Then he turned to Sarah. Well, do it and then come out, he said, rising. He nodded at Carrie, who got up quickly, took May's hand and left. Just sit a moment, dear, Aunt Sarah said. There's a few things that you must remember. What other things? I sat down on the settee. Olivia, your grandmother is very particular how children behave in her home. I'm not a child, I said. I'm nearly 16. Oh, I know, but until you're married yourself, she thinks of you as a child. Aunt Sarah obviously spoke from her own experience. She stood before me like a teacher in school. Most important, speak only when you're spoken to. Olivia thinks it's rude for a young person to demand answers from adults or give their opinion without being asked to do so. And especially never interrupt when someone else is speaking. I don't, I said. Good. Remember to say please and thank you and never sit with your legs apart. Put your hands on your lap, and at the table be sure to bring the spoon and fork to your mouth and not vice versa. And remember to keep only one elbow at a time at the table. Always dab your lips with your napkin and after you put something in your mouth. Sit with your back straight and don't stare at people. She recited as if she had memorized some etiquette book. Do you understand everything? I nodded. It doesn't sound as if I'm going to enjoy myself very much, I muttered. She went white. Oh dear, never say such a thing. Please, keep such thoughts under lock and key. Don't worry, Aunt Sarah. I've never embarrassed my parents. I won't embarrass you. I rose, my legs very reluctant, and left the house. Carrie and May waited at the rear of the car. I got beside May. How far is it? I asked Carrie softly. About 20 minutes. My teeth were actually chattering in anticipation of Grandma Olivia's disapproval and rejection. But why? I was finally going to meet my father's parents, my real grandparents. I should have been excited. All the grandparents I've ever heard love their grandchildren dearly, but I reminded myself our family is different. From the outside of my grandparents' house did not look cold and impersonal. It was a large wooden clapboard house. Aunt Sarah said that the house was very old and prestigious, the original portion having been built around the 1780. Carrie shook his head and raised his eyes toward the car's ceiling when Aunt Sarah went into her lecture about the house. A lecture I guess Grandma Olivia had given so many times that it was stored forever in her memory. The grounds were certainly the prettiest I've seen on the Cape. The beautifully cared green lawn was uncommon, and the flower garden was the most elaborate, with its baskets of gold and purple pansies, roses, and geraniums. There was a small duck pond to the right, with a dozen or so ducks in it. My most impressive were large, blooming red maple trees. Between two on the far right was a bench and a swing with a canopy over it. We stopped in the driveway and got out. Aunt Sarah was immediately brushed loose a strand of my hair back and straightened the shoulders of my dress. Leave her be, Carrie muttered. She stood next to Uncle Jacob as they rang the bell, the three of us standing behind them. A moment later, the door opened. I set eyes on my grandfather for the first time in real life. Up until now, all I'd seen was an old photograph of my daddy. Grandpa Samuel was still tall, straight-standing man with proud, strong demeanor. I saw my daddy's resemblance in his face immediately. Daddy, as did Carrie, shared his green eyes. Grandpa Samuel's hair was mostly gray, but he still had a full head of it. It was trimmed neatly at the ears and sides, with the top brushed back. There was a trace of a wave running through it. Daddy had had the same straight, firm nose, but Grandpa Samuel's lips were thinner, his chin more carved. He and Daddy's large hands and arms for a man his age. I thought he had a very firm, full shoulder width. Hello, Jacob, Sarah, he said. He gazed past them quickly to focus on me. I thought I saw a small smile on the corner of his mouth. The same light, gentle twist that Daddy often had. He looked quickly at Carrie and May. Children? Hello, Papa, Carrie said. Hello, Papa, May said. This is Melody, Aunt Sarah said, stepping to the side to bring me forward. Pretty girl. Lot of Hallie in her, eh, Jacob? Aye, Uncle Jacob replied, glancing at me. Hello, Melody, my grandfather said. I didn't know whether I was to shake his hand, curtsy, or just nod. Hello, I replied. I'm pleased to meet you. I almost added, finally. He nodded, holding that small smile on his lips. Well, come in, he told us and stepped back. Olivia is seeing to the brunch, of course. We entered a short, marbled floor entryway with paintings on both sides. Pictures of the capes and boats and pictures of sailors. The house was full of the perfume of flowers. Grandpa Samuel showed us to the room on the right, the sitting room. It looked like a showcase in a furniture show window. The oak floor was so polished, I was sure that I'd be able to see my face if I looked down. On every table of the shelf there was expensive-looking glass pieces, vases, and occasionally photos in silver and gold frames. I just glanced at them, but they looked like pictures of my grandfather and grandmother when they were younger, and some pictures of Uncle Jacob, Aunt Sarah, Laura, Carrie, and May. There were no pictures of Daddy. Sit with Carrie and May over there, Aunt Sarah instructed. We took the settee on the right. Grandpa Samuel sat in the chair, and Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jacob sat in the settee across from us. Although he kept his eyes on me, Grandpa Samuel spoke to Jacob. So, how was your week, Jacob? Fair to middling, he replied. We had a good day yesterday, eh, Carrie? Yes, sir, Carrie said. He shot a glance at me. Grandpa Samuel nodded, then he turned towards me. So you're Melody. How old are you? 15, almost 16. Aye, that would be right. He thought a moment, then smiled. I hear that you can play the fiddle. My grandfather played the accordion. I ever tell you that, Sarah? No, she said, her eyes wide. I've told you the same before, Uncle Jacob snapped at her. Did you? I don't remember you speaking about your grandfather playing the accordion, Jacob. Aye, he was good at it, Grandpa Samuel said, directing himself to me. I can still remember hearing his jolly tunes. There are better things to remember than a lazy fisherman, I heard a sharp, small voice say. We turned the doorway to see Grandma Olivia. She stood a little over 5 feet tall and wore a pale yellow dress. Her snow-white hair was pulled back in a bun as severely as Aunt Sarah's, which only made her eyes look bigger and her forehead wider. There was tiny age spots clustered at the foot of her hairline and on her cheeks. Without lipsticks, her lips were dull pink. Below her jaw, her skin hung loosely like a hen's. There were no bend in her back, but that's because she had such regal posture. She looked taller, sturdier than I was sure she was. You're early, she accused, gazing at us, her eyes fixing tightly on me. We were ready, so we came, Uncle Jacob remarked. Early's better than late, Grandpa Samuel said. She shot a look at him, and his smile faded quickly. Well then, she said, nodding at Sarah, make the proper introductions. Yes, Olivia, Aunt Sarah turned to me. This is Melody, Haley's Melody. Haley's, I thought. Why not Haley and Chester's? Was even my father's name forbidden in this house? Aunt Sarah nodded to tell me to stand. I rose and Grandma Olivia came closer. She drank me in, gazing at me from head to foot quickly, and nodded to herself to confirm some previous notion. Looks healthy. Tall, too, with good posture. Tall? I wasn't tall, I thought. But when I realized almost Anyone would be tall to her. Well then, what do you say? She asked. I glanced at Aunt Sarah, who nodded and smiled. Hello, Grandmother Olivia, I replied. The words appeared to sting her. She tightened her body and lifted her shoulders. We'll eat, even though we're a bit early, she said. And you'll tell me about yourself. Samuel, she ordered, and he rose. Carrie and May stood, and Aunt Sarah got up quickly with Uncle Jacob. For a moment I felt as if we were all in an army and Grandma Olivia was the general. She started out and we followed. We crossed the hallway into the dining room. It was a beautiful room with dark oaked walls and glossy, long cherry wood table. All the chairs were upholstered with high backs. The china looked very expensive, and the candle holders looked as if they were made of real gold. The silverware was heavy. Everyone had a linen placemat and linen napkins. Carrie, May, and I were put on one side, Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jacob on the other. Grandma Olivia sat at the far end of the table and Grandpa Samuel on the other end. A maid brought out the brunch. It began with a tossed salad, glittering with plum tomatoes and the greenest peppers and lettuce I'd ever seen. Long loaves of bread were sliced and placed on silver plates. Everyone was given a tall glass of ice water. Following that, a large dish of a perfectly arranged jumbo shrimp on a bed of lettuce was presented. There were small, cold potatoes, asparagus spears, and then 2 beautifully roasted ducks, all sliced. Grandma Olivia took tiny portions of everything, but Grandpa Samuel ate as much as Uncle Jacob and Carrie. I felt Grandma Olivia's eyes on me with every move and recited Aunt Sarah's instructions for etiquette at the dinner table to myself as I chewed and sipped and reached for things. So then, Grandma Olivia said suddenly, as if we were still in the midst of a conversation that had previously begun, Hallie called? Yes, Aunt Sarah said. The other night she spoke with Melody. Grandma Olivia turned her cold, steely eyes on me. Where is your mother? She called from someplace between Boston and New York, I replied. And how long does she intend to carry on like this? She asked. I shook my head. Carry on? Pretending she's doing something with her wretched life, she explained. I felt the heat rise in my neck and face. She has auditions, meetings, appointments, I said. She's trying to become a what? A model? An actress? She interrupted with a small, thin laugh. She then looked at Grandpa Samuel with an actress she's always been, she said. He looked away, and she turned back to me. Your father left you and your mother no money after all these years of a so-called honest labor. We had something, but expenses were high for us, and Mommy needed things and wasteful. Never changed a bit, she muttered. What did she look like? She asked Aunt Sarah. Oh yes, she's still very pretty, Olivia. Maybe she can be a model. Ridiculous. With her posture? Carrie, she snapped, deciding to move on to something else at the table. How's your schoolwork now? Not much better than it was, Grandma, I'm afraid, he said. Well, what do you plan on doing about it, Carrie? You don't want to have all that much more time left, do you? She asked. I'm thinking of being tutored, he said, shifting his gaze to me. I saw a small smile on his lips and smiled too. Grandma Olivia caught the look between us and turned to me again. You are a good student, I understand. Yes, Grandma, I've always been on the honor roll. Huh, she said and shook her head. Your mother didn't even graduate from high school, you know? I looked up quickly. Yes, she did, I said. Aunt Sarah made a tiny gasp and brought her napkin to her lips. She shook her head slightly at me. Was I supposed to just sit here and let Grandma Olivia say untruths? She told you that, did she? Yes, I said. She smiled a cold smile, twisting her thin lips until they looked as if they would snap. That girl never could distinguish between reality and illusion. No wonder she's gallivanting around the country trying to be an actress or a model. Grandma Olivia continued. How do you know so much about my mother? I wanted to ask. You who discovered my father after he married her. You who disowned my father after he married her. But I lowered my eyes and nibbled on my food instead. Then I gazed at May, who sat eating and staring ahead with a soft smile on her face. I wondered if either Grandma Olivia or Grandpa Samuel knew how to communicate with her. All I'd seen so far were smiles and nods from Grandpa Samuel. Grandma Olivia barely acknowledged her from what I'd seen. We ate in silence with everyone but Grandma Olivia keeping his eyes on the food before him. Finally, Grandpa Samuel looked up. The word I'd been getting, Grandpa Samuel said to Uncle Jacob, is there'll be a good tourist season this year, with the price of travel overseas going up and all. Uncle Jacob nodded. I hear that the hotels will be looking good. There'll be lots of garbage to clean off the beach this fall, he added. I knew where Carrie got his attitude about outsiders. How are the cranberries coming along? Grandpa Samuel asked. They look good. We're anticipating a decent crop. Does she expect to leave you over the summer? Grandma Olivia suddenly asked me. I don't know, I said. I hope not. She raised her eyebrows. And why is that? Aren't you being treated well at my son's home? They gave you Laura's room, I understand, and you're even wearing her things, aren't you? Yes, I'm being treated well, I said quickly. I just meant that I would like to be with my mother. I miss her. She smirked. A girl your age should have a home and not be living out of a car running on someone's pipe dreams, she muttered. We had a home, and we'll have another one, I said, my voice full of defiance. What kind of home did you have in West Virginia? She asked, not intimidated by my tone of voice. We lived in a trailer park. Daddy worked very hard in the coal mine. I never went hungry. And your mother, what did she do? She worked at a beauty parlor. That figures, Grandma Olivia said. That woman could wear out the mirror. Before I could respond, Grandma turned quickly to call the maid. The adults will have coffee in the sitting room, Loretta. Yes, ma'am. Bring out some ice cream and some of the petite fours for the kids, she ordered. Children? I looked at Carrie to see how he liked being referred to that way. He tucked in the corner of his mouth and gazed at the wall. Lucky for you, your Aunt Sarah saved all Laura's clothing, Grandma Olivia told me. She always had such nice things. Mommy sent for my things, I replied. I glanced at Aunt Sarah and saw the hurt on her face. Although I am grateful for what Aunt Sarah has given me to use, I'm just sorry about the circumstances. Grandpa Samuel nodded, his look softening. Grandma Olivia raised her eyebrows. And what do you know about the circumstances? She demanded. What? Well, I was told. Olivia, must we go through this again? Grandpa Samuel asked softly. Grandma Olivia snorted. Jacob says that you can play the fiddle well, she said. I was shocked. Uncle Jacob had actually said something nice about me? Maybe one day you'll come over and give us a concert, she added. My jaw nearly dropped. Was she serious? She stood up. Let's go into the sitting room for coffee, Samuel, she commanded. Right, dear, he said, rising. The maid brought out 3 dishes of ice cream for Carrie, May, and me, and served them with a plate of small cakes, the ones Aunt Sarah told me Laura had loved. Sorry, we only have vanilla ice cream, Grandma Olivia remarked. Carrie, you can show Melody the grounds when you're finished and entertain yourselves outside, but don't track in any dirt. And make sure May understands, she concluded. Okay, Grandma, he said, and signed the instructions to May. How is she? Grandma asked, remaining at the table and looking at her with pity. She's doing fine, Grandma, Carrie said, before his parents could reply. Grandma Olivia nodded, shaking her head as if to drive the thoughts away and lead the adults into the dining room. I felt the ceiling of oppressive gray clouds and heavy air too thick to breathe go out of her. You call this place the ice house, I remarked. Carrie smiled. She's not as tough as she makes out. We ate dessert, and I had to admit I did like the small cakes. The house itself is very nice, nicer than Alice Morgan's. Who's she? My best friend back in Sewell. I gazed at the pretty things in the antique hutch filled with expensive crystal, the beautiful chandelier above us, the rich large paintings on the walls. How did Grandpa make so much money? I asked Carrie. A great deal was left to Grandma Olivia when her parents passed away. Grandpa had a fleet of fishing vessels, including 5 lobster boats, but he lost most of them during bad times. Luckily, my father had his own by then. Come on, I'll show you around. He signed to May, and she gulped down one more spoonful of ice cream. I took her hand when she came around the table. Carrie led us through the house, down the corridor, and past the door to the kitchen. And we opened the door to a small porch. Behind the house was a large gazebo, small benches, a rock garden with a small fountain. The rear of the property was on the beach, and there was a dock with a large sailboat and a small motorboat tied to it. This is a beautiful place, I declared. They actually have a small cove here, so it's not as rough as it is up and down the beach. We walked down to the dock and looked at the ocean. The waves were gentle. Milk-white streaks of clouds lay against the blue sky. To the right against the shoreline were large rocks. See the mussels clinging to those rocks, Carrie said, pointing. They were dark purple against the stone on the sand. Seagulls strutted about searching for clams. I saw one circle the rocks and then drop something from its beak. The moment what it had dropped and hit the rock, it scooped up to retrieve it. What is that bird doing? Seagulls drop the clams on the rocks to break the shells, then drop to eat them as soon as they hit the stone. Smart, huh? I shook my head in amazement. Not only was what I saw, but how much Carrie knew about it nature. I looked down at the beach to our left. A large sailboat bounced over the waves, its sail flapping in the breeze. I can understand why my dad wanted to go out to the seashore so much. He missed this. Carrie nodded and glanced at me, then checked the knot on the rope that held the motorboat to the dock. May signed as if we were going to go look for seashells. Not too far, Carrie signed. She nodded and then directed her attention to the beach. Our grandmother sure hates my mother, doesn't she? I said. Carrie kept his watchful eyes on May. Looks that way, he admitted. Do they often talk about her and my daddy? Hardly ever, he said. He started for the beach and I followed. I can't understand what my daddy could have possibly done to make them so angry. Why shouldn't a man have the right to choose the woman he loves to marry? Why do they have to disown him? She's very cruel. Or are you going to tell me it's simply because she's afraid too? He spun around with his eyes filled with more pain than anger. Grandma's bark has always been worse than her bite, he said. After you're here a while, you'll see that. It takes her time to warm up to strangers. I'm not a stranger. I'm her granddaughter, whether she likes it or not. He looked away. May was close enough to the water for the tide to touch her feet. Damn! He rushed to her and pulled her further back. I thought he was unnecessarily rough with her and said so. Then I took her hand and we walked away. I told her I would help her find seashells. Carrie followed. She can't swim, you know, he said in his defense. She can't swim? No. Even if she could, the undertow can sometimes pull the strongest swimmer out to drown. I kept us at a good distance from the water. I understand why you're so protective of her, Carrie, and it's a good thing, a loving thing, but you've got to get her and let her breathe. He stared at me. The wind made the strands of his hair dance around his face. I felt the sea spray on my own. Above us churned circles and cried. I know why the family had nothing to do with your father, and why he and your mother ran off, he confessed. You do? Yes. He knelt down and plucked a shell out of the sand and handed it to May. It wasn't something anyone told me, he continued. I learned about it from bits and pieces over the years and being nearby when they would discuss it. When my father realized what I learned and knew, he pulled me aside one day and forbid me to ever mention anything, especially in my grandparents' presence. Tell me, I asked softly. Your mother should have been the one to tell you, or your father, but I'm sure they were too ashamed and afraid, he added. My heart seemed to stop and then start, accompanying that came with the thunder that made my blood rush to my head. Ashamed of what? What had they done? Married, he said. So? Are your parents and our grandparents so conceited and arrogant that they looked down on someone who wasn't from what they call the best families? Someone who was an orphan? Just who do they think they... Your mother was an orphan, yes, but she never told you about the truth about who her adopted parents were. I held my breath. What do you mean? Who were they? Grandma and Grandpa, he said. Your mother and father grew up like brother and sister. And when they found out that she'd become pregnant with you, it was even more of a disgrace. I shook my head and nearly laughed out loud. That's stupid. That's some ridiculous lie your father told you to cover up the disgraceful, disgusting way they treated my daddy. It's the truth, he insisted. No, I put my hands over my ears. I won't listen to another horrible word. May stared at me, her face in a grimace. She started to sign quickly, asking me what was wrong. I shook my head at her. I thought you should know, so that you would understand why everyone has those feelings about your mother and father. Maybe you won't blame Grandma and Grandpa, my father and mother, so much. I blamed them more, I screamed at him. More for lying. They're not lying, he said softly. I'm surprised those gossip mongers in school haven't said anything to you. It's an old story, so maybe they don't know, or maybe they just don't realize who you are. I shook my head and backed away from him. You're just getting back at me for what I said about May. You're cruel. I hate you, I said. I hate you. I ran down the beach with tears streaming down my cheeks. I ran as hard and as fast as I could, my feet slipping and sliding in the sand. I even splashed through some water without caring, and then I fell forward on the sand, exhausted, my chest feeling as if it would explode. I took deep, hard breaths. He had to be lying or passing on their lies. Why wouldn't Mommy or Daddy have ever told me? Moments later, Carrie stood at my side. I knew I shouldn't have said anything. You shouldn't have said anything so stupid, I resorted, looking at him. He stood holding May's hand. She looked frightened, as if she might start to cry herself. I got to my feet and brushed off my clothing. We gotta get back to the house. I'll show you something, he said. I turned with him and we started away. I took May's hand and we all followed. At the rear door, Carrie paused. This way. He took us around the north side of the house, where there was a metal cellar door. He reached down and pulled it open. There was a short cement stairway that led to another door. It's the basement. I hesitated. He went down the stairs and opened the next door, stepping in to pull the cord that turned the swinging naked bulb. When we walked down the stairs, I saw the basement had just the ground for a floor, but there were metal shelves against the old fieldstone foundation. I passed through cobwebs. There was a dank and musty odor. This is under the oldest section of the house, Carrie explained. I think it was once the fruit and vegetable cellar, something like that. Laura and I used to think this was our clubhouse. We didn't mind the dampness or the spider webs and mice. Mice! They've scurried into their hiding places by now. He smiled, then stepped across the small room into one of the metal shelves, pulled out a carton on the second shelf, lowering it to the basement dirt floor. The cupboard was left, and its clamminess was soft and nearly ripped under its touch, and he opened the box slowly. Here, he said, waiting for me to approach. I took slow steps, my chest feeling as if it swallowed lumps of coal and now lay stuck against my heart. May remained at my side, clinging to my hand. I gazed into the box. It was filled with photo albums. He took the first one out and opened it. Your parents were gone by the time Laura and I had discovered all this, of course. When we asked Grandma Olivia about these pictures, she forbade us to ever come here again. We didn't for a long time, he said. I looked at the pictures. They were old pictures taken of children, 2 boys and a girl. This is your father and your mother. This is my father, Carrie pointed out. He turned the pages, which contained pictures of Daddy, Mommy, and Uncle Jacob as they grew older. The resemblance became sharper and clearer with every turn of the page. Your father was always a big guy, huh? And your mother, she was pretty from the start, he said. Tears streamed down my cheeks as he slowly turned the pages, revealing pictures taken on lawn parties, a swing bench near the flower gardens, pictures on sailboats and fishing boats. There were school pictures as well as a group family picture. I shook my head in disbelief. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry that you never knew the whole truth. I bit down on my lower lip and sucked the air through my nose, ignoring my hot tears. He put the albums back in the carton and neatly closed it and placed it back on the shelf. There's a lot more here, but maybe some other time, he said. I turned away, realizing May's hand. It felt as if I had to let go of a lifeline and I were now drifting into space. Dazed, I went back to the cement steps and up to the daylight, vaguely hearing Carrie put out the light and close the basement door behind us. I stared out at the glittering sea, the ocean looking like a floating mirror, mesmerizing. A cocoon of lies had been spun around me. Carrie had sliced it open, and I was looking out into a world with different eyes. But more was yet to come. I sensed it. And that ominous dread put thunder in my heart. I would know it all, I vowed, no matter how damning the truth might be.